You know, my work has always been kind of my story about what it's like to be alive. So it's about my personal process or what I observe as life on Earth. So it's kind of a storytelling. But they're not narrative in the sense that they tell a story that is complete in a way. They're narrative in that they basically touch upon a moment, or they describe a moment in time, or an aspect of consciousness or the psyche that someone else can possibly relate to, because it is displaced and isolated in a field that has not that many cues in it. Mm-hmm. So that allows the viewer to be drawn in.
So they're all, they tell a story, and they're very autobiographical, right?
Yeah, in terms of where my mind goes as I'm in the process of doing a series of paintings. Like I might be working on one painting and I might be thinking about it in one way, and as the process of painting the painting goes on, I start thinking of it in different ways, and another image will evolve out of that I then have to paint because I want to see what it looks like. So they're autobiographical in that sense, in that they track where my psyche goes while I'm in the process of painting. Usually if I do a series of paintings, I start with just one image that happens to come up. One time I was walking in downtown Chicago, and someone handed me a religious tract with a tent on it. It's like a picture of a tent, a guy sitting at a tent. And I was kind of blocked at the time, so I thought, well, I'm just going to start with a tent. And then that evolved into a whole series of paintings where the tent got a fire in front of it. Then it became a camping scene. Then there was an environment added to that, and a kind of narrative storytelling that became like the camping trip through life. And I think a lot of the groups of paintings that I do, or even my body of work as a whole, is kind of about a journey, that journey that we take, And for instance, the bird painting started with, the first one was a heart, the painting called Heart Pecker, with a little bird sitting on the top, floating away in the water. And I did that when a friend of mine, very, very close friend of mine, had open heart surgery, and I did it for him. So then the bird became something that wanted to do something else, and then that moved on to the next painting. So what started out as a painting about hearts became the beginning of a series of paintings about birds. So in that sense, it kind of has a life of its own that I get to follow, and it's an adventure in a way, because I'm not ever sure. I don't sit down and say I'm going to do 10 paintings and they're all going to have birds in them, and they're going to be this, this, and this. And at a certain point, I added a figure, a head, with a woodpecker, tapping on the forehead, which,
Do you ever feel that you are not controlling your brush?
Oh yeah, sometimes I'll look at paintings that I've done in the past, and I'll look at them and I'll think, I don't remember how I did that, because it truly is, it's a process that takes over, and each brush stroke tells you what the next one will do. It's not something that is conceived of as a whole and can be then just executed. It has a life of its own, and often the process of using the paint and the texture, the quality of the paint, or the way that I start to use it will create a new image, like where a certain way that I was using paint in a group of paintings became water, because of the way I was just manipulating the paint, and then that became water, and water became a huge element in my paintings that really came from the process of using the paint.
Did you ever consider yourself part of the feminist movement?
I was in the 70s. I was, involved in the feminist movement with, and it was great because at that time I had no role models really that were women, and all of a sudden this whole thing sprang up, and there was meetings and consciousness raising, and it was great. And I'm still very close to a lot of the women that I met at back then.
And now you're a role model.
Yes.
We talked about a certain body of work and the symbolism and the vocabulary that you developed. Does that still work? Because you're doing a lot of public art now. Does it interchange? Or is it a whole different ballgame?
For me, it really is two different paths. Some of it can be integrated, but in terms of my paintings, like the paintings of the birds that we had talked about, it's really a very personal process that's about projecting my personal psychological process into a character or an actor. It's almost like a stage drama where there's an actor that's portraying an internal process via an external environment, and it's very personal in terms of individual. The bird is almost a stand-in for the individual psyche or the ego, and at the same time he's also a representative of the environment as a whole and the fragility of all that. So I like to think of it as the fragility of the eco structure and the ego structure. So anyway, it becomes a very internal process for me where one image truly informs and gives birth to the next image, because I'm kind of in a world when I'm doing a series of paintings like that, and it grows from within itself. Whereas to do a public art project, it's for me more of a conscious process, whereas my personal work and my smaller paintings, they really do kind of evolve out of kind of an unconscious mercurial leap from image to image. And the public work has to be something that you conceive of ahead of time, and present to very often a panel of people, and you have to be able to communicate with them and have them be able to understand it in order for the whole process to move forward. And for instance, I've had an art dealer tell me that he wouldn't show my bird paintings because they could be upsetting to people who love birds. And of course I had to explain that they're not really birds. Because of that kind of reaction to really intense imagery, in terms of public art, you really have to take into consideration who's looking at the work, what their daily activity is in the process of looking at the work, and what you want to add to that environment, and how I like to take into account how I want those people to feel on a daily basis when they're walking past my mural on the way to the cafeteria, for instance. And so it is a different set of considerations for me.
You've been working on a very large mural for where?
I'm working on a mosaic installation for a development in Pasadena called Paseo Colorado.
And where will it be? Not the center, but the mural.
It will be behind a fountain.
Aha.
And also on the floor in front of the fountain in the mosaic.
Now, why you're working in glass mosaic, right? Why did you choose that rather than tile or something? Why glass?
It's really a unique medium, and you really don't see it that much in the United States. It's a traditional European Venetian glass, and it has a different quality than tile. It's translucent glass, so when the light hits it, it really comes alive with color, and it projects the color at a great distance, so it can actually be read from a much further distance than, say, a painted mural or just a tile mural, because of that vivid, lucent quality.
Have you worked in this before, or is this a brand new medium?
Yes, I've done a number of projects. And I've done some portraits, which have come out.
And you do this in Italy, right? They make, you draw the drawing and then...
I do the design and I paint the painting and break it down into the, color sections, etc. And then I have it fabricated by a family that has been doing it for generations and generations.
Where, in Italy?
Yes, they make their own glass. And
when you said you do the little sections and break it up, all I could think of was those paint by numbers.
Kind of, it's kind of like that.
So what other public art projects have you done in the past?
I've done a mural that was a painted mural at the MTA headquarters building that's behind Union Station, that incorporated just postcard-like images of aspects of downtown and souvenirs that I gathered at the station, at Union Station, kind of just floating through the air. And I did another project for Motion Picture Association of America, doing images that represent the history of motion pictures.
Did you find it was hard to start working that large in the public art way? Because your paintings have always been quite small. Or not all, but many.
Yeah.
And to go from one to this humongous size.
It's different, but it's also a fun. It's like an adventure in a way. I mean, I have worked on a much larger scale in painting than, for instance, the bird imagery. But still, my paintings, individual paintings that I've done, only ranged up to about 6 feet, and this was a 20-foot project. So it required, you know, a lot of logistic stuff, but in a sense, it's the same. You just have to be climbing all over ladders, which makes it harder.